Hi, my name is Ava, and this is my slide presentation on feminine rage and monstrosity. So, for my thesis, I have Cassandra Claw's fiction, particularly in the works like Nothing But Black and Teeth. She reclaims female rage and monstrosity as acts of resistance, portraying women not as victims or villains, but as complex figures who embody power, grief, and transformation in defiance of patriarchal expectations. So for some background information on Cassandra Claw is a non-binary writer who uses they, them pronouns and is from Malaysia. They are especially well known in two creative spaces, literature and video games, where they work as both a narrative designer and a game writer. One of the things that sets Claw apart is their lyrical prose. Their writing style is poetic, vivid, and often unsettling, especially in their horror fiction. They've spoken about being deeply influenced by H.P. Lovecraft and Japanese horror, both of which come through strongly in their work. And they also wrote Nothing But Black and Teeth, which is the novella I'll be talking about in this project. Nothing But Black and Teeth, the plot, it follows a group of friends who gather in a decaying, haunted Japanese mansion to celebrate a wedding. The main character discovers that a bride was buried alive centuries ago, and over time, young women were sacrificed to keep the bride company in her death. And as the group explores the mansions, they have tensions from their past that resurface, and they begin to experience terrifying supernatural phenomenon, including the appearance of the ghostly bride with blackened teeth. So this book connects a lot to Gothic literature in many different ways. The first one is it's an allegory. Basically, an allegory is a story that uses characters, events, or setting to represent abstract ideas or deeper meanings. Nothing But Black and Teeth has an allegory for historical oppression of women, and it's shown through the literal burial of brides, and it reminds us that such buried injustices never truly die. And it also showcases folklore. It consists of traditional beliefs, myths, and legends passed down through generations, often reflecting a culture, values, and fears. This particular book that she wrote kind of reflects Japanese culture and Japanese folklore. The ghost with blackened teeth in the novella is rooted from Japanese folklore, specifically drawing from the Ogaru Batari and Oaya legends, giving cultural weight and horror to the narrative. Gothic literature also often explores the darker sides of human nature, especially internal fears and moral decay. In the story, each character is forced to confront their inner demons, with supernatural forces acting as a mirror of their suppressed guilt and their trauma. Claw, with her great prose, uses great imagery throughout her book as well. Imagery refers to vivid and descriptive language that appeals to the senses. Claw's use of graphic body horror and unsettling visuals like decaying flesh, blackened teeth, and grotesque rituals often showcase the imagery that's used in the book. And the supernatural in the novella manifests through the ghosts, curses, and unexplainable phenomenon that happens in the book. And a taboo is a subject that is considered socially or culturally unacceptable to discuss openly. The novella addresses the taboo of women's oppression, both historically and emotionally within themselves, and as well as adultery and betrayal in close relationships. So my first quote from the book is, "Even if it was a house with rotting bones and a heart made of a dead girl's ghost, I'd give it everything it wanted just for scraps. Some unabridged attention, some love. Even if it was from a corpse with blackened teeth, anything to feel alive again right now." And I just really thought that this quote showed a desperate need for connection, even when it comes to something horrifying. The image of a house made of rotten bones and a dead girl's ghost isn't just literal, it reflects their own inner decay and unresolved pain. Wanting love from a corpse with blackened teeth shows how loneliness can make someone, even the most twisted version of affection. The horror here isn't just about ghosts, though, but about what people are willing to accept to feel something. The ghost sacrificed herself in hopes to one day see her husband that never comes. And this represents the sacrifices that women often make to be accepted in their everyday lives and within society. The next quote from the book that I chose was, "Have you ever cannonballed into a cold lake? The shock of an old memory is kind of like that. Every neuron singing in a bright hosanna, here we are. You forgot about us, but we didn't forget about you." And I chose this quote because I think it really embodies kind of the silencing that women had to go through. This quote compares the return of the painful memory to the shock of diving in a cold lake, showing how buried trauma never truly disappears. It reflects how the mistreatment of women can be pushed aside, but it still forever lingers, waiting to resurface. The line, "You forgot about us, but we didn't forget about you," suggests that these suppressed wrongs demand to be remembered. And Call uses this imagery to show that the past, especially rooted in injustice, will always come back, especially with the women in the book that were sacrificed. For my next quote, it's from an interview, and in their interview, Cassandra states, "As with most things related to female ghosts, I think it has a lot to do with outdated ideas of what a woman should be and where her place is. Even today, some people still think that a woman's duty is to her family first, to upkeep for her household and to care for her husband's needs. I think some of the stories, the ones told by women, are wish fulfillment, their secret hopes for revenge." And in this, Cassandra draws attention to the cultural and historical expectations placed on women, expectations that are deeply rooted in patriarchy. And by referencing female ghosts, she invokes a trope in folklore and horror where women who have suffered betrayal, violence, repression, so on and so forth, return as supernatural beings. And these figures often haunt domestic spaces such as houses, kitchens, and things like that, especially within Japanese culture. And Cassandra's observation that ghost stories reflect outdated ideas of what a woman should be and where her place is kind of relates to how these narratives emerge from a legacy of containment and silencing, kind of stereotyping women and putting them in this place where they have to be domestic and they have to be a wife and they have to be like a naif. And the female rage and monstrosity that these ghosts are feeling is reclaimed as acts of resistance. They're not letting themselves just die off. They're making sure that they are known to everybody who comes to the house that they are still there. And for my next quote, I have in an interview with I don't know what I wrote there. And in an interview, she states, "The idea that good women are seen, not heard. Good women work hard and don't complain. Good women give everything in hopes that the people around them will be happy." And this quote reflects a central theme in Nothing But Blackened Teeth, where the ghost of the buried bride embodies the consequences of these harmful expectations that were put upon her to get married and to serve her husband. And though she wanted to do so by having herself buried, it kind of led to the mishappening of all of the other girls who were sacrificed in hopes that she wouldn't be lonely. All of the other girls were silenced, sacrificed, and made to wait for a man who never returned, which is an extreme version of the good woman narrative, giving yourself up for a man. And Call uses this ghostly figure to criticize how society rewards female obedience with invisibility and suffering. So society kind of rewarded this one female who decided to give herself up for her husband by literally sacrificing other people. And in a literary criticism that I read, an interesting quote that I found that related to the main character, Kat, is Kat is haunted by the past in more ways than one. She and her friends have a history of investigating haunted sites together in Kuala Lumpur, using Kat's extrasensory ability in their special entity detector. And a lot of the themes in Gothic literature is when women are often portrayed as closely linked to supernatural, reflecting the stereotype that they are more emotional, thus making them more more susceptible to ghostly influence. Ghosts in these stories frequently feed off emotional vulnerability, making women ideal hosts for victims. And in Nothing But Black and Teeth, Kat, the protagonist, struggles with mental illness, and her condition deteriorates the longer she suppresses her trauma. So her mental illness is kind of her way, or Call's way, of reflecting society's view of women being super emotional, and then making Kat susceptible to ghosts. And for my next literary criticism, a quote that I found interesting was from Cassandra Call was, "Narrative is frightening and staggeringly powerful, and those who control the narrative control what the world sees." And historically, women have had limited control over the stories that were told about them, often being portrayed through narrow, stereotypical lenses, either through like a passive, emotional, or like dependent figures. And these imposed narratives have dictated how women are viewed in society, influencing their opportunities, their autonomy, their self-perception. And I just think that this quote kind of embodies the fact that the power to control narrative means the power to define value, capability, and identity. And when that power is held by others, women's realities are distorted or erased. But what was interesting in Nothing But Black and Teeth, it seemed kind of what the Knave character typically were, these girls that were innocent and that really cared for their husbands. In the end, because we talked about how Knaves, they either die or they change, but these girls did both. They died in their sacrifice, but then they also changed and became these ghostly figures of power that then haunted the visitors. And in conclusion, after I collected like all of my quotes and everything, I kind of just tried to figure out really what about like female rage and monstrosity Cassandra Call was saying, and I came to the conclusion that female rage and monstrosity, often embodied in the form of ghosts, serve as haunting reminders of the deep injustices women have endured at the hands of tradition, sacrifice, and a society that demands their silence and compliance. These spectral figures symbolize the emotional and physical toll of being forced to conform, to suppress their desires, ambitions, and identities in order to meet the expectations placed upon them. But sometimes their own internalized beliefs are the expectation. And yet, in becoming ghosts, these women refuse to be forgotten. Their lingering presence defies carrying the weight of their pain and unmet potential into the present. And through them, the legacy of wronged women persists, fierce, unyielding, and powerful, demonstrating that even in death, women possess an enduring strength and an unwavering dedication to make their stories known. And then this is my reference slide. Thank you.